I'm on the phone with a New Zealander named Fraser, and I decided to talk to Fraser to invite him on to talk to me while I'm on camera, because he mentioned having, I guess, some negative experiences, maybe in a sense some positive experiences, with him pointing the finger at, identifying, or reporting neo-Nazis on the internet in the aftermath of the Christchurch shooting. And he got to see the way in which certain online organizations reorganized themselves in that period, which is now, just a few months ago. So my experience on YouTube has been extremely negative with pointing the finger at, drawing attention to, and criticizing neo-Nazis, fascists, and white supremacists. I have on 3 different occasions had a video deleted by YouTube, and I have been punished because my video was quote-unquote hate speech, and in 2 of the 3 cases, I was quoting, criticizing, and denouncing a white supremacist or a neo-Nazi for their hate speech or for their political position. So this raises a lot of weird questions about how YouTube works, how the internet works, and the future of political discourse. So just before we turn on the camera, he said to me, "Well, I hope this interview is in good faith. I hope this discussion is in good faith." Yeah. So no, but it's a great question. But I mean, I think actually part of what's being questioned here is how can we have these discussions in good faith if you're in a situation where, maybe it's just using the word Nazi gets your video banned. It doesn't matter that you're saying Nazis are bad or whatever. You're saying this guy's a Nazi. It should be addressed or criticized. So how did you respond to this? I heard you vaguely mention this in the chat forum. What happened next?
Amplitudes of Freedom of Information Acts, calls to the internet service providers trying to find out what's going on here. Why can't I go and use the internet like I should be? I go on Spark as my internet service provider, and I call up their helpline and ask, why can't I go on 4chan? And they say, it must be on your end. Then I have to go to an alternative social media to find my true answer that I was seeking for. I have to go on Twitter, which Twitter is sharing these horrible videos and is sharing links to the Great Replacement. But I have to go on Twitter to find out why I can't go on 4chan. So these are 2 social medias. Right. 4chan has been around for longer than Twitter. If I want to get information, if I want to get news, I'll be honest with you, I'll go to 4chan, not Twitter, because it's not algorithmic on Twitter.
So did the government of New Zealand formally pass a law like Communist China does that was creating? In China they call it the Great Firewall of China, that was creating a censorship regime that was blocking these websites, or was it ad hoc? Was it informal? Was there no legal or political justification?
While it was all happening, both parties acted like they had nothing to do with it. The Freedom of Information Act said, "Nah, we didn't do anything." The internet service providers say it's my problem, not theirs, and if it's the government doing it, it's out of our control. But in reality, what the case is that the internet service providers acted in haste on their own volition, and also were given a list. They were informed by the government, let's say. The government gave them a list and said, hey, here's something to consider. And then the internet service providers did their bidding, but not in a legal sense.
Okay. Has it lasted, or is 4chan and so on, are those sites now visible in New Zealand?
It took about a week and a half, maybe 2 weeks. So it wasn't down for the whole time. Now, personally, I think that there's not a big issue around it if it wasn't for it being equally applied, right? So if 4chan's going to get taken down because this shooting video is being propagated, then why isn't the same happening for Facebook and Twitter?
Yeah. I mean, well, okay, that already is an interesting question where it's not an ideological contrast. It's just a different competitor in the free market providing the same service. It's bizarre, yeah.
Less historic competitor as well. Like 4chan is one of the originators, I would say.
I admit I have never once used 4chan in my life, just disclosure. Yeah, it's okay. I don't feel there's anything lacking in my life for having never used 4chan. But yeah, I mean, the other question is, where does it stop? Massacres are an important part of history, whether it's massacres in Cambodia or whatever. And I mean, I've just been making videos asking, well, if you're going to censor every video that lies about World War II, and I understand the sensitivity to that. I understand emotionally why people feel it's better to shut down anyone who's telling lies about this or World War II. Well, are you also going to shut down Japanese people who lie about World War II? Are you also going to shut down communists and left-wingers who lie about World War II? Because people who support Joseph Stalin still today are still out there on YouTube making positive statements about Joseph Stalin history. So, I mean, I'm only comfortable with censorship if we have very clear standards that are applied to everyone equally. I wasn't even thinking about it in terms of everyone meaning two different corporations, like Facebook versus 4chan, but everyone meaning every ideology. And,
I could take this to like even an academic level, Right. So when the Great Replacement got casted as objectionable, then only those accepted or certified by the government were able to possess this book, this document, right? Yeah.
I have read the manifesto, of the Christchurch shooter, and I commented on it at the time, and I think that many people working in the mainstream press had not read it. It's possible they were just being dishonest, but I assume you've read it. One of the things that leapt out at me was the fact that he refers to China positively many times, and he refers to his own past as a communist and linked to communism several times. That, to me, is very significant. I recently met people, so he's obviously someone who made the switch from communism to what he called eco-fascism. So, but that's...
I think it's primarily about the authoritarian aspect of it.
Right. But you see, but already that is something people can learn from. That's something that's important.
Yes.
That's...
It's vital to learn what his agenda was if we're going to...
Well, right, but to give you, I spoke to some people on Discord recently, voice chat over the internet, and they were presenting themselves as completely 100% hardcore communists. And then a couple of days later, there were other people in the room, and they told me, two of those guys who were talking about communism, just a few months ago, they were right-wing white nationalists. Just a few, like they remembered these guys from maybe it was 6 months ago, maybe it was 4 months ago, whatever. They only recently became Marxists and then communist extremists. So again, I just say there's something important to be learned there. There's a lesson there. Anyway, sorry. I mean, here I am smiling and laughing about it, but it doesn't matter if you want to laugh, or you want to cry. Okay, so I just asked, was part of your experience also kind of reporting who the Nazis were and seeing those dominoes fall, or no, was that not part of what was going on?
Yes, so there was a point in time where I was trying to figure out if there were any white supremacist movements in New Zealand, and who these people may be, what ideas they rally behind, and I discovered this fairly recent. They had been operating in 2018, a group called the Dominion Movement, and the Dominion Movement, they're pretty straightforward, right? They have the black sun symbolism, which is also on the front page of the Shooter's Manifesto. And they describe themselves as a grassroots identitarian activist organization committed to the revitalization of the country and our people, white New Zealanders, with this purpose in mind.
So not a lot of mystery there. Not a lot of mystery to unravel.
It's pretty straightforward stuff, right? Yeah. If you're going to talk to a white supremacist, they make it well known. They don't use these very ambiguous dog whistles like okay hand gestures if they want to get their point across. They talk about our people and things like this. It's rather straightforward. So the Dominion movement, they took their website down quite a way back, but fortunately somebody had captured their page on the Wayback Machine. So I was able to have a dig through after the shooting and see what they're about, try and find some names and things like this. There's not really much to dig up out of it.
Yeah. Something I just want to say in general I find disturbing. How did this custom develop in the Western world that when someone commits suicide, immediately their YouTube channel is deleted, their Facebook page is deleted, all trace on the internet is deleted? When someone commits murder, like, I mean, regardless of the case, whether it's political murder or not, I really fundamentally disagree with this. And it's just a custom. It's not required by law. I can remember many years ago when I was on the internet, a relatively young man committed suicide. I think he was in his 20s. And his mom took over his website and, put a notice, my son's now dead, but, many of you left, nice messages here, so I'm going to maintain the website, in his memory. Why not? And, there was the so-called YouTube shooter, the woman who went and had a shooting at YouTube headquarters. Yeah. Why would you delete the evidence of who this woman was and her struggle? Again, obviously, to keep that evidence intact is not to celebrate it, But even so, even if there are people who are drawn to that, like a moth to a flame, and celebrate it, then at least you can address those people. I mean, then at least it can draw out and you can solve the problem. Yeah. Anyway, I find it very problematic. I don't have a problem with some website maintaining the standards that, say, CNN maintains or mainstream news channel maintains, where nobody gets to swear. There are no swear words. There's a very limited range of political things that are possible. But I mean, what the internet presented to us, I don't have to fantasize about the internet in the future. I can just talk about the internet in the past. What the internet presented to us was the possibility of a much wider and deeper range of political discourse.
Yes. And I think that 4chan is the epitome of that, where any person can go online and be given an equal platform to anyone else. Mm-hmm. So there's some rumor that Taylor Swift uses 4chan, and this is because she gets treated like everyone else. Yeah. Like, that's the idea of the website, is you get treated like anyone else. Yeah. No, anyone who's a celebrity, you get treated just like any other shit poster, Yeah, everyone's on an equal platform, whereas the likes of Facebook and YouTube, their political sway to the left has been very, very well documented, especially in the past week.
Yes, yeah. I just made a video talking about that yesterday. Within the last 24 hours, Ted Cruz addressed that in America. Yeah. So I'm very interested in that as it develops. So let me ask you, I would imagine, correct me if I'm wrong, your feeling was the problem is not 4chan, and here you discovered this group, this Nazi group, that really was the problem. So what did you do with that information? I mean, if it were me, I might try to make a YouTube video about it or something. I don't know. What can you do with it once you got it?
I write a small amount of documents. There's honestly not much one man can do, right, other than to share the word of a nation that not many people give a fuck about. I listen to not the mainstream media, but the state media. And I'll listen to these clips and hear people advocating for political violence, like the throwing of milkshakes, and saying that 4chan and video gaming is what is fueling these deranged shooters. And all I hear is the ostracizing of cultures of video gamers in general, saying that video gamers are deranged people who are going to commit school shootings on average.
Right. Well, look, I just mentioned, so both of my parents became communist extremists, and I mean, so this is 100 years ago. This is many, many decades ago. Before I was born. But one of the questions you kind of have to ask, and most of the people you'd ask today would already be dead or very elderly, is why didn't someone intervene? Like, why didn't someone step in and say, look, I understand you're being drawn deeper and deeper into this kind of subculture. You're surrounding yourself with people who regard this stuff as normal and so on. But, who is going to check that? Now, the difference is, in that time, there was no internet. my father got drawn into that through, pamphlets on paper, and he didn't just have to walk places to go to meetings. He had to take long bus rides. Canada's a big empty country. He had to really move long distances to go to different kinds of events by bus and by hitchhiking. So the level of motivation you had to have compared to just watching some YouTube videos was much, much higher. But kind of the question, my grandparents, that whole generation is now dead. And again, it's nobody's responsibility, right? To counter that kind of tendency, it's nobody's job to sit down with someone and say, look, I know you've been reading these really biased sources about history, because a lot of it is constructed out of history, whether it's left wing or right wing. Yeah. You've been reading this and you've become radicalized, you've become motivated by it. But have you thought about this? Get someone to sit down and challenge it.
I think that it's up to our, as much as I truly hate to say it, it's up to our surveillance agencies to find the correct language that these people use. Personally, I don't think that they organize on 4chan, because 4chan is absolutely chaotic. I think that 4chan is like the top of the pipe when it comes to pipelines. You may group up and form on a different platform, but it's once it goes to those points and onwards that the surveillance agencies need to know the language, the explicit language that they use. It's such a difficult. It's the internet, It's such a difficult issue.
I'm gonna say something oddly optimistic to you, though. So I used to be a Buddhist. I'm now openly an ex-Buddhist, but I can remember saying to people within Buddhism, the reality in prisons today. So this is very true of Canada and the United States. It's probably a little bit less true of Australia and New Zealand, but not so different. So the reality in prisons today is people go to prison and they either become neo-Nazis, get involved with white power movements in prison, or they convert to Islam, also very common in prison.
Yeah, they need to protect themselves.
Yeah, and also it's just, prison is a desperate, lonely, boring time in their lives. Yeah. And then, of course, there are some who maybe convert to Protestantism, some form of charismatic, Christianity. This is what's going on in prisons. Don't you think Buddhism could be a really positive alternative for people in prison? Even if it's just to be intellectually stimulating. Go on.
I think the issue is that how the hell is it going to make its way in?
Wait! But I'm not talking about it passively. Right. Oh no! But I'm talking about Buddhist charities with money and organization actually going in and doing things, which the Muslim organizations do too, and so on.
Can make their way in. I can give you a very, very relevant example of New Zealand's most prevalent religious. What do you call one of the top dogs in in the church? Like, as far as you can get, a bishop.
Yeah.
So there's this man called Bishop Brian Tamaki, and he wanted to advocate for a thing called the Man Up program in prisons, where they like you're saying, they put in charitable hours and bring these gang members of violent thugs and meth addicted, people who have had fucked up childhoods, and they man them up. They turn them into adults. The issue with that is that Brian Tamaki has also been inundated in his own political controversies of how gay people cause earthquakes and all this, dumb shit.
The problem is the religion is built on a lie. Fundamentally, it's a bunch of lies. Yeah, this is a big problem. Man.
But this is an example of a religion wanting to move in and uphold some good values among these very gangs are quite a big problem in New Zealand, and they grow because people don't have their father figures.
Right. Well, so, I've met a couple. I knew a couple of New Zealanders when I lived in Asia, in Southeast Asia, and the theme they came back to again and again about New Zealand culture was loneliness, which I found interesting. So that's a very, and hey, video games may be a part of that too. It's a way of being alone.
Time to go by. It's okay. Everyone has their vices and their hobbies, but
Well,
I think I'm blessed with the technology I'm given.
Just to finish the point, though. So I wasn't specifically saying the answer is more Buddhist monks going to prisons, but I just pointed out. So, and I'm not a Buddhist anymore. I'm not part of any Buddhist organization. But my point was, instead of just hoping that government surveillance captures these things, I wonder if there isn't some kind of positive alternative, philosophically or as an organization that can try to press forward. I'm horrified to see communists are gaining new converts. Communism really is making a comeback. I can't believe it in 2019. So go on.
Brendan Tarrant had almost no history. He had no reason to be in a prison in the first place. This is why it's so difficult to pick up on radicals like him. He did nothing that would suspectedly put someone on a government watch list, per se. I don't think he did, at least. He must have done some things, but not anything that I would be able to figure out.
Well, I mean, I think that the reality is we live in a world where, belief is dangerous. I think that's true across the board. I think, Christian faith is dangerous. I also think, these kinds of extreme political beliefs are dangerous. But, we live in a world where, increasingly people are the arbiters of their own faith, and they look around on the internet for little bits and pieces of information that affirm the faith, affirm whatever it is they want to believe in. Okay, so it's been nice talking to you. I was going to try to wrap it up. Why don't you give me some final thoughts? We're coming up on the 30-minute mark.
No, I've lost it now.
I sabotaged your outro. Look, you can tell me, but I mean, the future of New Zealand is in some ways bright. I mean, in some ways, nobody is seriously worried about the future of New Zealand, despite this massacre and despite the consequences, and the government, in a somewhat amateurish way, scrabbling around. I mean, I don't know. When you look ahead to the next 5 years, obviously that this has been a huge in New Zealand. I think there's an absolutely huge disruption to the regular political status quo. But
so I can make a finishing point on this.
Sure.
It's just that there is always a consistent push towards authoritarianism in my country. That's the main point. Is that even though I was saying that the only way we're going to capture these sorts of people from stopping to stop their crimes is to increase surveillance. That's the exact opposite of what I really want, because surveillance in my country is already over the top. There's already examples of private citizens having their phones traced and things like this, with the example of Kim.com, the owner of Mega and Mega Upload. Yep. He had his house broken into because I would say Hollywood just has too much power over our country.
Well, I'd say also, when you talk about authoritarianism, the alternative being democracy, one of the things I think is most positive about democracy is that it draws people out to defend and explain their ideas in a theatrical way. So I can remember I was at City Hall. So this is the lowest level of democracy in Canada, at City Hall. And there were some real far left-wingers. They were either communists or left-wing socialists who came in and gave City Hall a lecture about labor rights and the oppression of the workers. And it was a specific group of workers too. It was wasn't all workers in general. And then so they finished their presentation, which was so many minutes, 6 minutes. And then the members of City Council, the elected people, they said, "Oh, okay. So what's your proposal? What do you want us to do?" And they were stumped. They really had nothing. They were so used to, probably at that time already on the internet, they were so used to just vituperating and speechifying, and it was like, oh no, wait, okay, you've come here, look, we're willing to hear your proposal for how, how these people's lives can be improved, or what you want us to do differently. What is it you want us to do? So even that,
authoritarianism,
right. Well, no, but I mean, even that, just drawing people out and giving them the chance to feel embarrassed, because maybe that's a bit embarrassing. Oh, gee, I never really thought through, a lot of extreme views become less extreme, I think, when they're really included in the public forum in that way. Maybe that's recklessly optimistic of me, but that's where I'm going to end this conversation for today.
Because like you say, even you arguing against white supremacists have your video censored on the internet. I think that the other side of the debate will be rather concerned. Say you are to debate a far leftist, upload that video to YouTube and have that video get censored, then that far leftist is just going to be as pissed off as you are that video got taken down because of hate speech.
Yeah.
So we got to rally together and have some debate, not hate.
Okay, thanks very much. This is a great note to end on. Thank you.